Welcome back to the Get Off the Treadmill podcast for small business owners and entrepreneurs, where we show you how to build a successful business and to have a life too. We're going to dive into another topic that helps us make more money in less time and to get off the treadmill so we can experience a life of significance. And now, your host and the author of the #1 best-selling business book, Making Money is Killing Your Business, Chuck Blakeman.
Today I'm talking with Allison Harvey. She founded Benediction Counseling in 2014 and serves as the clinical director and as a therapist. Allison earned a Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Sciences from the University of Northern Colorado in 2005 and received her Master's of Arts in Counseling from Denver Seminary in 2010. Allison is passionate about training and mentoring and serving as a supervisor for newer therapists. She has a strong belief that the community at large is stronger and healthier when therapists befriend and support each other. The other hats Allison wears are wife, adoptive mother, biological mother, daughter, sister, and friend. She enjoys swimming, a good long walk, quiet music, a good cup of coffee, and slowing down with a good book of poetry. Welcome, Allison. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much. It's nice to be here.
Today, we're going to talk about something that I love. We're going to talk about starting with the end in mind, or the question, what does it look like when we're done? I'll preface that by saying Stephen Covey actually quoted me in his final book before he died. He died in a tragic bicycle accident riding downhill, and I have to be careful with that because I love bicycling. But before that, we were just beginning to get to know each other, and he quoted me in his book. And I've been a huge fan of the book that made him famous, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. And it was, start with the end in mind was a huge piece of that. I'd like to start with that, but before I do, I want to introduce everybody to Mark Ballestri. Everybody's saying, why is this guy on the line? Because we usually have just two of us. But Mark is one of our facilitators and one of our business advisors who's been working directly with Allison on the things in her business for the last year. And so we want to hear it from both horses' mouths, how this is working. And I'm going to be more the fly on the wall today, but I'll get it started and then I'll be annoying here and there and jump in. Let me start with how either one or both of you would work with that statement. What does it mean, or that question, what does it mean to start with the end in mind? What does it look like when you're done? What did you mean by that? Mark, maybe you start with how you saw that.
Yeah, let me start. I think I can be accused of in the past kind of doing a lot of work, running as fast as I can, and not have a clear idea of when I'm accomplished, what I needed to accomplish, what it looks like. And so what I found in a lot of my businesses is that once I had clarity of what does this business look like when it's serving me in impacting the most people possible. And when I did that, it opened up possibilities that were frankly hidden prior to just go, 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 go. And so I love to start with that question with all of our business advisor clients. And because to me, without that, we're hitting the go button and we really have no clear intention or no clarity of where we want it to be. And I could then be mistaken and start sending them in directions or making recommendations thinking I know what they want it to look like, and yet I really don't. So that's my definition.
So you're basically trying to avoid what I call the Alice in Wonderland problem.
Yes.
Where, I can't remember which character it was, but which road do you want to go on? I don't know. Well, then any road will do.
That's right.
And that's the way we mostly do business. I call it the random hope strategy of business. Yep. I'm going to work really hard and hope something good happens. Starting with the end in mind gives us a much better angle on that. So Allison, how did that settle for you when Mark brought that through as one of the first things to talk about?
Oh, it was so helpful. And I feel like I should self-disclose that I'm not a visionary at all. And so that question, I was able to interact with that question probably more than if it had been asked in a different way. What do you visualize for your business? But the question, what does your business look like when it's done, was a really fun thought experiment that got my head in a different place as we started working together in this mentorship relationship. So it felt like permission to me.
Yeah.
I can be an implementer really easily. So getting out of the weeds is something I need help with. And what a welcome question, I think.
I would guess if you're normal, like most business owners, that's not a question you ask yourself. We just never think of that. It's just like, well, we just keep going and we got to pay our bills this month.
And I think that might be how I would describe myself, maybe as a little bit more of an opportunist than that, but like almost a good enough. If things are good enough, then they're good enough. But
Yeah.
that's also not enough leadership for me either.
Mark, what did you see with Allison that made you want to ask that question, or how did you respond to it when she said it?
Well, for me, what was so exciting, because we were doing our meetings over Zoom, is it was literally almost like a light bulb went on. And what Allison said, I think, is really true. It almost, for the first time, gave her permission to think about her business in a different way. If you will, Chuck, it gave her permission to figure out ways how her business can serve her and her ideal lifestyle. Where before, I don't know if that necessarily was the implied or implicit case for her before. And that's when it got exciting, because then we just had all this kind of fun brainstorming what it looks like and why, and really what has to happen then from there. So it was just really, it was such a thrill. And I think I told her every time I talked to her how much it just gets me more jazzed than her sometimes. I think I'm just like, this is wonderful.
Yeah, I put it on the back of the first book, Making Money's Killing Your Business. And it was actually a placeholder put there by the guy who was doing the graphics on the book. And the big bold statement is, use your business to build your ideal lifestyle. And I remember feeling almost guilty about that when he stuck that on there. And we never took it off, because that's really why we should have a business. But somehow we just never think of the end in mind, or what it looks like when we're done. It almost feels like we shouldn't. And so getting permission, that's not something you just experienced by yourself, Allison. I think all of us experiences that at some point.
Yeah, I think that idea of the ideal lifestyle feels like another way to ask, what does your life look like when your business is done?
Yeah.
And that's been a really intriguing thought experiment to play with also. I love that invitation as well.
Did you guys use the 2-page strategic plan to play with this, Mark? And
Yes, and that's exactly the best segue to say, because with that fun that we had, with that experimentation, with that playing that we were doing, to visualizing, to really understanding what does this look like when it's done and it's serving me, we then were able to start really at the top. So what are some strategies that will help us get there? And then what's standing in your way to do that? So we asked those questions. She had already, Chuck, an incredible big why. She had a great vision. She has an unbelievable mission statement. We just reviewed those. We asked a few clarifying questions, but those, for the most part, she's really put some great thought into that. It's when we were able to play around with what your business looks like when it's done, and then put those down into strategies, and then put those down into actually rocks that need to be done for the year, the quarter, and then the month. And then when we met, that was kind of how we used our meeting after we did our initial check-in. And Allison maybe can explain some really big rocks that she's accomplished this year as a result of using this methodology that, on the surface, for a lot of people, I think would seem overwhelming when you say what it had to be done. And yet it seemed that it happened with ease because she just followed the process.
And before you do that, Allison, I want you to jump in on that. Let's not forget that. I just want to, for our listeners, what is the big rock? You said a little bit about it, but the big rock is I learned in 13 businesses that when I have 8 things I want to accomplish in the year, I get none of them done. When I have 3 things, I get all of them a third to a half done. When I have 1 or 2 things, I tend to get them done. And so what's the one big rock you want to crush this year to help you get where you need to go? So at the end of the year, you could say, if I get this 1 or 2 things, sometimes 3, that makes this a successful year. So that's what we're talking about. So yeah, jump in and share with us what were some of those, what did you find as the big thing in your business that you needed to do in that 12?
I would say the big two things that I really prioritized this year were I'm going to state it in a past tense because this morphed over the year, but I'll share what I started with at least. To hire, train, and delegate to an office manager. I'm in a position where I'm doing too much in the business, and I need to really delegate, and that also gives me some freedom to breathe outside of the business too. So that was one, was to hire an office manager and to complete delegation to them. And then to find a new office location. Our business needed a new office to help it grow a little bit. So those were the two big rocks. There were a couple like secondary things. Community development, something that I always want to keep on like the forefront of my mind, and I need to work to keep it on the forefront of my mind. So I put it down as a rock. And then we actually did a lot of work together on financial stability too. And I see that as an ongoing work.
You've been doing this stuff for your whole life, and you're now delegating to an office manager who you didn't have, and now you're hiring one. Was there any roadblocks behind that?
My goal changed actually as I got into, I think it was like probably the process of writing that job description. I realized that I had an opportunity within my practice to help make that work more affordable as well. So that was a piece of it. I host student therapists in my practice regularly, and what they need from me is direct service hours. They need contact with clients. And so part of what I wanted to delegate to that office manager was our intake work when new clients reach out, looking for a new therapist. I was going to ask that office manager to do that work. And then it occurred to me that we have people joining us asking for that work. And so when I started to have these thoughts, I thought maybe I can get a student therapist into that position and they can do the intake work. They're getting the direct service hours that they need. And I don't have a person on the payroll doing that work.
Mark, how did you see Allison's mindset evolve around this? Because this is a big deal for all of us in hiring people to replace things that we know we can do and love.
Yeah, and we had those conversations, and it started again with the big why and what does it look like when the business is done serving you. And so it made it so much easier to have the conversation. Well, how will this help you get to where you want to be? And because of that, Allison actually has a lot of creativity, but she didn't have the clarity that the creativity could have served. And so it freed up. And so we started in one direction. It's that bad plan carried out violently, oftentimes get good results. But she had an epiphany because of the clarity of what that business looks like when it's done. And it was so exciting because we just kept having these new brainstorm sessions using the same data that we got in the beginning, but just refining. Oh, it could look like this now. Oh, it can look like this. Oh, that's even better. And that was the really unique, I think, aspect of our mentoring, is to see her take that clarity and actually use her creativity to build that ideal business and ideal lifestyle.
So you guys using what I like to think of these things in terms of principles that work for all of us, all of our listeners, and you used a really important principle here that I think is lost so often because we're so involved in just trying to make today work and the tyranny of the urgent and all that stuff. The principle that I hear here, that I understand here, is that you worked with the result and did not focus on the process. And we're wired the opposite. Yep. We want to know how. How is our best favorite question? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And instead, we need to be asking ourselves, where are we going to end up with this process? What result do I want? So what and where take precedence over how. And if you, and you both said it so clearly, I just want to emphasize it for our listeners. If you have a real great understanding of where you want to end up, that's the result. That will inform your how, and you can figure out how one little step at a time, because you're always looking at that marker out there saying, am I getting closer? Am I wandering? It's all about the result, and the process will unveil itself. And that's just unnatural for us, I think. Did you experience some of that, Allison?
Yeah, I think so. And I think,
Switching from the process to the result?
yeah, and the result, I would frame the result as, what do I want off my plate this year? A
Okay.
little bit,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And once I had that list of tasks that one option was to hire one person to do all of those things. But once I had that list of tasks in front of me, I saw different ways that I could delegate those,
Hmm.
maybe not to one person. And what Mark was supporting in as a part of this process was he was just encouraging me to do the research on all of it. If one person were to do all of those things, what would that cost be? If you were to separate it in different ways, what would that cost be? And what I ended up doing was, delegating that intake work to the student therapist, and that's unpaid work for me. And I hired a professional billing company to do the billing. That was another thing on that task list that I wanted to hand off. An office manager could have learned that. I would have been in the teaching role, and I would have been very involved in coaching for a long time, I imagine. But hiring a billing company, it it took a little bit of work to hand that off, but they know more than I do about billing in the end, so
Yeah, they do.
the long term stress expense was lower in that way.
So that's another great principle I'll pull out of that. Is that basically is I learned this in my first 8 or 9 businesses. I'm a pretty slow learner, but I finally learned it that I shouldn't get in business. And let me back up. As a human being, I should always try and improve the things I'm weak at as a human being. But as a business owner, it's just the opposite. Anything I'm not good at and I don't enjoy doing, I should delegate that. I give that to somebody who is good at it, who loves doing it. And again, that's non-intuitive. We think, oh, I'm terrible at fill in the blank. I need to get better at that. No, you don't. It'll just make you worse at what you're really good at. So I'm sure you guys had fun playing with that principle, is just figuring out what am I good at and give the other stuff to other people who are good at that so that I can just get better at what I'm already good at. It's a hard thing for us to figure out. How did you guys use the strategic plan? I'll let you guys take it from here for a little bit, but to work on these big rocks, delegating to an office manager and getting a new office location and then the financial stability. How did you use a strategic plan to help you do that?
Yeah, Allison, I'll start a little bit of my observation and then, let the audience know if you felt this way or if you saw it differently. But what I saw is 2 things. The tools only work when you use them. So it's one thing to talk about what your business looks like when it's done. It's another thing to set up strategies and big rocks for the year, the quarter, and the month. But then what really puts the power, the leverage, is the twice a month we followed up with that. And I think that helped to add focus and clarity. So it was a living, breathing document with permission to make changes to the process, because it wasn't about the process, like you said, it was about the results. And it was that consistency that I think really helped Allison open up the possibilities for her. And one of them was a big one, was the medical billing. And it was something that we knew subconsciously was possibly even affecting her growth, because she knew that as her practice grew, that meant more work for her in billing. And she despised billing. She was good at it, but she despised it. Right. And it drained her, though. And so that was the conversation we had of, oh, well, what happens if you shift things around and then have somebody else who's really good at it do it, so you're freed up to do the other things you really love. Allison?
Yeah, I'm just nodding my head in agreement. I think a lot of what we did was, after you asked me that big picture question, what does your business look like when you're done? Then we named the rocks for the year. I consider those yearly goals an annual goal. And then we created quarterly goals to support those rocks. And we were even working on a monthly basis to start. So we had monthly goals as we started to really chip away at those. And we made so much progress. We're kind of back to quarterly goal setting now. So yeah, I think it was really just kind of chipping away at the bigger goals by making them bite-sized. And Mark had a lot of great ideas for, why don't you look into this? Here are some references or some things I've used that have been successful for my businesses. Just little tidbits to guide the process as well.
Yeah, it's great. Eat the elephant one bite at a time, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
What else? How else did you use the 2-page strategic plan? We have the 12-month, 3-month, 1-month, second page, and the vision, mission, and values, vision, mission on the front page. What were some ways that you found having a tool like that valuable? Let's start with this. How did you keep that alive? Because a lot of times we write stuff down like that. We make a fancy document, and then we put it on our shelf to make our shelf look good. Like, I call those shelf help books. We have shelf help books that help our shelf look good. Well, you have a shelf help plan that helps your shelf look good. How do you keep it relevant?
I've slacked in my practice a little bit, but it's still alive enough to mention, I guess.
Yeah.
I look at my book. I look at I have a notebook that starts with my ideal lifestyle. I
Okay.
have a graphic that represents what I'm working towards. Next page is my strategic plan, and I look at that, and then onto the quarterly goals, onto and so I look at it regularly. I was looking at it weekly. That's why I feel like I'm
Yeah.
slacking.
And you're okay, because I'm guessing most business owners don't look at a annual plan more than once a year, if that often.
Sure.
Because they put it on their shelf because they're too busy with all the other things that are going on in life. So I love the simplicity of what you just said. I look at it. That's how I keep it relevant. It's pretty much that simple. That doesn't make it easy, because we have to discipline ourselves to carve out the time to look at it. But when we look at the things that are important, they impact the way we do the things that are daily and seem small and lacking in importance. They aren't. We can eat the elephant one bite at a time, as long as we look at the elephant and say, okay, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
So I love the simplicity of that. Mark, you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's spot on that. And I think what we did is we brought it alive every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, we'd revisit not the annual, because we already set the annual.
Yeah.
And when we set our quarterly, they were there to support or complete our annual goal. And when we support the monthly, it was there to support our quarterly goal. So once we got the quarter done, then we go back and we look at the annual to set the next quarter up. And so it's just that continual. You don't have to revisit it all the time, just the things that are most relevant and the things that will then can be actionable that week, that month for you.
Yeah, it's a great way to say, if this is what I want done a year from now, then what should I do within the next 3 months? And all I have to do that is 4 times. If I do that 4 times, I get the month or the quarter or the year done. Well, if that's what I want done in the next 3 months, then what should I do in the first of those 3 months? And so we eat the first month. And then obviously when we're looking at that first month, what should I do this week? And now this week becomes relevant for getting through the next year, instead of just getting through the week, which is the way I think most of us do things. So brilliant. I love it. What did you find any rocks along the way, or any roadblocks along the way, Allison, in getting this stuff done and using this planning? Was there any struggles for you in changing your mindset or just implementing this? I think one you mentioned was just staying with it. Sometimes we lose the regularity, but was there anything else? And it doesn't have to be. I'm just fishing.
I think the only thing that comes to mind is a little bit of overwhelm. When we started, we were like, it was easy to break, these big goals into smaller pieces. But I'm thinking back to January and February. I walked away from our meetings with a to-do list of like 19 to 20 points. And they were all manageable, truly. And I was able to get through them, but it took a little bit of like mental management. Say, I'm going to do a little bit today, and then I'll schedule some for next Thursday, and then I'll do some more the following week,
Yeah. And I appreciate your transparency on that. It's always different. I just got off the Zoom call with a client today, and they have one thing that they have to do in the next 2 weeks. And last week they had like 11, but there were 11 little tiny things. And this is one big thing. It's going to take them the whole 2 weeks to get it done. So it varies.
It does. And I was able to see improvement over time too.
Nice.
We started we started with a lot, you know, and I've worked really hard this year. But my to-do list hasn't been that long for a while now too.
Brilliant. That means something, you know, that's the tyranny of the urgent versus the priority of the important. We talk about that constantly. And what you're telling me, what I heard you say was that the strategic plan is an important thing that's not urgent. Nobody has to do one. But because you did one, you just said something incredibly important to every business owner listening to this podcast. You have fewer things on your to-do list because you paid attention to a few important things. And that's the point of this whole process. The more I pay attention to the important things, the fewer to-dos I will have over time. It does lessen the load and create freedom for us in our business.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, thoughts on any of that?
No, I think she nailed it. We speed of execution. We executed in some really important items, and as we did, Allison started to see more and more time free up, and she started to see other business metrics improve dramatically. And so it's a snowball effect. And now the momentum's going, so it takes very little effort to go down the hill, but climbing up that hill can take a lot of effort. But once you're at the top and now you're going down, that's what's happened this year, and that's what Allison's experiencing, and it's wonderful to see.
Yeah, I love that. Paying attention to the important reduces the urgent. It's something it's hard for us to grasp that until we've actually experienced it. So appreciate you coming on and sharing that. Allison, how can people get a hold of you and your company?
Well, we've got a website, benedictioncounseling.com. That's where we live.
Okay.
That's probably the easiest way.
Sure.
I've got my personal, there's a button to email me on the website. So
excellent. Benedictioncounseling.com.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. Well, we just scratched the surface. Hopefully, if anybody wants to get to talk to you about how they would do their strategic plan, I love for people to talk to the people we work with, because you're on the ground in the trenches doing the same thing they're doing, and it's very identifiable. So if anybody wants to get a hold of Allison for that, or to just work with your company and find counseling, that would be great. We'd love to have them do that as well. Pleasure to have you on, Mark. Great to have you on as well. And let's all figure out how to make more money in less time and get off that treadmill. Let's keep going. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you.
That wraps up another episode of the Get Off the Treadmill podcast. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and hit the like button to ensure you are receiving the latest tools you need to grow your business and to get off the treadmill. If you want more information on the 3 to 5 Club, the Crankset Group, or to book Chuck as a business advisor, speaker, or workshop leader, you can contact us at grow@cranksetgroup.com. Until next time, have a great week.